Welcome back to Cbus Mob. I am excited. I am here today with Merisa Bowers. She is a former small business owner, recovering divorce attorney, and now a loss mitigation specialist at the Ohio Bar Liability Insurance Company, and has a new title as of this year. So, Marissa, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much, Allison. It's so fun to be with you on this podcast. I have been a diligent listener. I'm jealous that I'm not in the studio with you today, but this is fantastic. So, in my current role at the Ohio Bar Liability Insurance Company, you're right. I serve as loss prevention counsel and also now director of marketing. So I'm thrilled to be here with you and share some insights into both professional liability insurance and into my work.
All right. Well, I have some questions. How did you make the transition from owning your own business to going to work somewhere? Because, like, for me, that's terrifying.
Yeah, it was scary, right? But I think after some of the challenges and trying to pivot and identify different ways to maybe solve some of the problems and struggles that I was having in sort of a post-COVID world, I realized that what I was doing was not sustainable. So I was running my own business. I was serving on city council. I still serve in that role, wife and mom. And I realized that I did not have enough left in my tank to fill those roles in the way that I wanted to fill them. So I was presented with an opportunity to join OBLIC, Ohio Bar Liability Insurance Company. We call it OBLIC. And I was so grateful for the opportunity because it's an easy company to love. I believe in the mission of what we do. And so really the transition was a lot easier than I thought it would be.
I mean, I, from like a very logistical perspective, what's it like to tell all of the people you serve, like cancel all your subscriptions, do those things that you might not think about but are very practical and have to be done?
Yeah, the wind down process, you have to be so intentional, right? And what I was fortunate that I had a decent runway, being able to wind down business that I needed to finish, make referrals appropriately so that my clients could identify new counsel, wrap up cases, and complete that kind of closing down process. It probably took it about 6 months total to really
Wow.
bring it around, but it was thankfully my company was generous and gracious and understanding with that process, and my clients were fantastic. They were by and large, certainly happy for me. They were disappointed, I think, that there was maybe going to be lack of continuity, but they understood. The ones that I had to transfer or refer out to other counsel.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Okay. So you took 6 months to wind down, and then you also had to get your feet wet in like a whole different world. You were no longer a divorce attorney and you were working for someone else. So like what was that like for you?
Yeah, definitely. There were definitely some changes, right? Having to be in at a certain time because other people expected me to be in at a certain time. So that was a little bit of a shift, but I'll tell you, I mean, as a small business owner, you get this, right? We've all got that internal drive and we're hard workers. And so it's not hard to show up. And so that really wasn't challenging. And thankfully, because I'm in a small business, we have the opportunity to provide our skill sets where they're needed. And so I think that's great coming from my own business and coming into a small business. In a small business, you wear many hats, right? You're the CFO, the CEO, the CMO, the CIO, you're
All
all the
those, all
you're
those.
close, right? And so I think that moving into a small business was still a gentler transition, perhaps, than going into a large corporate setting, because I got to bring that many hats mentality to my company, where I think I was able to provide additional value than simply the role I was hired into.
And I think that's the next question I was going to ask you is like, how did you bring that skill set that you developed over the last, decade and a half running your own business? And what do you think you've added to Oblick that they maybe didn't have with someone who was at a firm and then came over?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple different things. So one is that I think that anyone who's been in private practice comes in with a really important perspective into the work I think that I'm doing now, right? That we know we have compassion, I think, for our colleagues, the boots on the ground, and how challenging the work really is. And so bringing in that understanding of the load, the stress, the various hats that are being worn, and really showing up with compassion for the attorneys that we serve. I still to this day, and I know there's another kind of part to the question, but to this day, I'm so grateful to be on this side of serving the bar, than in an adversarial role to my colleagues. So I'm just incredibly grateful to be with such a great company. The other piece of it, I think, to answer your question, is that multi-hat wearing, right? So it's not just in your own practice or your own firm, but also in my role as serving on city council. I've run two successful citywide campaigns in the suburb that I serve in Ohio, Central Ohio. And I was able to, I think, leverage the understanding of a campaign, right? And so a marketing campaign and a political campaign are really not that dissimilar in many ways. And so merging the concepts that I think allowed success in my political campaigns with ensuring that we are being thoughtful and strategic in business development and business retention, I think has been an asset that perhaps wasn't as considered here as we are now doing today.
And that's how you got the new title, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's fine. You work,
Identify the gap and fill it, right? That's what we do.
I was like, as a small business owner, we're like, we'll just take more. Like, please
Sure.
give me more stuff I want to do. No, that's great. How does that work? Because I very candidly think of insurance as one of those like very hard to market things because of one, disclosures. God love our lawyers, right? We disclose, disclose, disclose. And so insurance can sometimes be amorphous or just like hard to put your hands around.
Yeah. So I think that Oblick is just such again, I feel like I just drank the Kool-Aid, but I was a customer, I was a policyholder before I was an employee. And truly, it is an easy company. I think once we're able to share with the bar and so with attorneys that we serve, the type of company that we are, the history, the longevity, the stability, and how we were started was by lawyers intended to be for lawyers. And I think that really distinguishes us in service to the profession, in addition to our strong ties to the State Bar Association, which I think also provides a significant benefit to the bar at large.
Sure, sure. No, I agree. I mean, I'm an Oblique policy holder, so I drank the Kool-Aid as well. I represent a lot of small businesses, and the first question I often ask is like, do you have insurance? And they're like, yes, I do, but it's often the wrong type of insurance. And so I want to talk a little bit. So Oblique is professional liability. We're not talking about slip and falls. We're talking about something else, right?
That's right. We're talking about professional liability, and Oblique, our bread and butter is solo and small firms to mid-sized firms. So we insure firms from 1 to 100 attorneys. Practice must be primarily in Ohio. And we also offer some magistrates policies, employed lawyer policies. So if you're in-house counsel at a company, and we also offer a supplemental judicial policy that helps cover additional, perhaps litigation costs if a judge were to be grieved. So that's the Oblique array of professional liability policies. And then we have an internal agency. Our internal agency is able to sell other types of business insurance, including business owners E&O, health insurance, group health insurance, life, disability, and some ancillary insurance products. So we're really positioning ourselves as a full service company. Our agency is certainly a full service agency, and able to help small business owners across various professions. So professional liability, you're right, is distinct. It's not the same as property insurance, for example, like you mentioned.
Talk more about it because I just think it's one of those things that a lot of folks need. And if you're like a doctor or a lawyer, I think it makes sense. But if you get into maybe a paraprofessional or trying to think like accountants sometimes, or anyone who kind of falls within those other roles. And I know you only insure lawyers, but kind of talk about like the general idea of professional liability insurance.
Yeah, so generally, professional liability insurance protects a professional from a negligence or a malpractice claim asserted by a client or patient, I guess, if you were a physician. And what I kind of found interesting is that when I joined OBLIC, and especially coming in and thinking about loss prevention and primary to that role being teaching continuing education classes for lawyers, I was thinking about all the professional conduct classes, all the courses that I've taken over my span of my career. And I'm sure you've sat in on many as well.
Oh, they all just try and scare you. Like if you and then but that's it. They just scare you and then you move on.
So I have very intentional. I felt the same way, and I very intentionally wanted to stay away from the gamut of just rattling off grievance cases because they're often not terribly instructive. Because so frequently, unfortunately, we see attorneys who are in those disciplinary positions who are suffering from a mental health or substance abuse disorder. And so when I came to the role, I came with that sort of boots on the ground experience of having been a practitioner and attending those courses, and then coming into OBLIC and thinking about my role as I'm helping risk manage not just for grievance prevention but also for legal malpractice prevention. And what I recognized is that we go to all these classes and we hear all about the rules of professional conduct, and we can recite, rule 1.6 and rule 1.15, and we understand what these mean by and large. But what I don't think we talk about enough is about what is a legal malpractice action, or what is a professional malpractice action. And I was practicing mostly family law and criminal defense. I wasn't thinking about tort elements. And when I got to OBLIC, I was like, oh, wait a minute, a malpractice claim is the same as a tort claim and a negligence claim, and it requires the same 4 elements. So thinking about how our best practice recommendations fit into those 4 elements has really helped, I think, hone and deliver the type of recommendations in professional continuing education, professional development that we're trying to offer.
That makes sense. And you're giving me flashbacks to the bar exam because torts was like the subject that I could not always get to stick in my brain. So thank you for that. I haven't thought about that in a long time.
I promise we're not going to talk about eggshell plaintiffs. Really,
No, I'm
16 years in practice, I've never heard of an eggshell plaintiff.
I mean, I think the biggest takeaway, I think, on thinking of it as a tort is there has to be damage because oftentimes there's stuff that maybe has happened, but there's not a damage to the client. Not that that's to say, you can get away with it, but it is an element of it that is certainly relevant.
Yeah, so just to kind of walk through these elements, and these same 4 elements apply across malpractice professions or
Sure.
alleged malpractice in various professions. So 1, there has to be a duty, right? The professional, whether it's the lawyer or the doctor, had to owe a duty to the plaintiff, right? And so in law, that duty is created by the presence of the attorney-client relationship. So that's one of the things that we can protect against and help mitigate is intentionally forming the relationship and setting the parameters around that relationship with scope.
Engagement letters and closing letters
Engagement
and
letters.
good scope.
Yeah, defined scope of representation, defined scope of services. So that's the first element, right? Second element is breaching the standard of care. That's I think where we think of most. Did you miss a date? Did you fail due diligence? Did you not understand or apply the law correctly? And those are the types of failures of the standard of care that can allow a plaintiff to move on to the third element, which is that proximate cause element. The one that law students, I think, have the most difficulty synthesizing into
this
what
was
that
the death
actually
of me on the bar exam. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So as the way I try to explain it and the way I understand it is all it means is that but for my error, the plaintiff would have been successful in their underlying case. But for the mistake that I made, they would have been able to prevail, right? And so that's the causation element. Similarly, I think that in an accountant situation or a medical situation, the plaintiff is going to have to make that same element.
Yeah. No, I mean, that makes sense based on my remembrance of torts. I say this half-heartedly. We do torts all the time in our firm, and every time we have to get into it, I'm like, the but for cause. That is sometimes the hardest thing to prove.
Yeah,
right?
but
Is
for.
but for. We don't know.
Right. And that's where it gets sticky. That's I think one of the harder elements for us to proactively prevent around, right? Because that's not really where I can get into prevention efforts. I think it's helped guide me on ensuring that I'm connecting prevention efforts and recommended best practices, especially into those first two elements, the creation or the formation of the relationship and adhering to the standard of care. Where
And
does insurance, oh, sorry, I was going to
no,
pivot.
go,
Insurance,
go, go, go. I was gonna do the same, so go for it, Marissa.
sorry.
No.
So, how does insurance fit into all this, right? So, liability insurance is going to provide not just those damages in the event that there was a duty owed, a breach of that duty, the causation, and then the damages. So, your insurance is going to help indemnify you against any liability associated with that error, plus defense costs, right? So, your litigation costs. Litigation costs continue to rise. The tort practice is no exception. And so, one thing that we try to explain to attorneys and to professionals generally is to understand whether your limits include your defense costs, or would your defense costs be paid outside of your limits? So, inside, outside, or eroding limits, that's a big deal. And I would recommend that professionals take a look and make sure that they understand whether they have defense costs included in their limits or if defense costs are separate from their limits.
Yeah, and often there's like you get to choose, right? I've seen those quotes every time I renew a policy, and it says inside limits, outside limits, but understanding what they mean. Okay, so I have a question for you because
Okay.
again, as someone who buys insurance, you're always like, I don't know, like I think there's a value in an agent. At least I think so, where you can pick up the phone and say, like, can you explain this to me? Do you find that that also plays a role in making sure that you're insured? I don't want to say are better educated, but kind of know when they have to submit a claim, what's going on, have context.
Yeah, so there's value, I think, both ways. And Oblick sells both direct and through agents. So we not just our own internal agency, but with external brokers too. And you're right. I think those relationships are very powerful. There's a strong trust bond, I think, that's often developed. And when you're insured, you might be more inclined to pick up the phone and call your agent first before filing a claim. So yeah, so we have started much more intentional outreach efforts with external agents and brokers to make sure that they really understand the spirit and the nature of the company, the types of policies that we offer, when we expect claims to be reported, and how to report them. So I think by engaging in those efforts, both with our policyholders, with the public at large, and with brokers, external brokers, I think that hopefully we're helping get the word out about how and when to call Oblick, call your liability carrier. And I guess I want to just say on that note, we offer, I think, unparalleled customer support, policyholder support. We have a complimentary ethics hotline for folks to call, policyholders to call, ask questions. It can be as simple as, what kind of disclaimer should I put on this ad? All the way up to, is this a conflict issue? Or, oh my gosh, I think I missed a date. What should I do next? So through some of the claim repair efforts that we offer and the ethics consults that our policyholders are entitled to, we're really able to provide, I think, a significant value add to our policyholders.
Is that where like the loss mitigation counsel title comes in? Because you can step in before there's necessarily a claim and be like, here's the action items to reduce harm to client.
Yeah, so we walk a fine line. So I see myself a little bit as like a law librarian in some respects, right? That if I get a call in about kind of a broader question or a general question, or I know that there is an advisory opinion or a comment to a rule that's directly on point, I can share that information and say, here, read this. And if you still have questions, I can't give policyholders legal advice, but I can set them up with outside legal counsel. And so triage the situation and refer them out for confidential support from outside counsel.
Makes sense. You're the first line of defense. Here's some information. See if you can make a good decision. And then from there, if you still need help, we gotcha.
Yeah, yeah. And again, I think coming from a small practice, solo practice experience, understanding that when you're in that role, sometimes it's very isolating and lonely. For attorneys to know that they have this resource, that they can have somebody that they can just talk the situation through with, that can solve the problem right off the top.
And a live person usually answers the phone,
Right,
which
right,
makes a huge difference, right? If you're
right.
compared to your homeowners or autos insurance where, you keep pressing buttons until you get to a human.
That's right. I want to speak a little bit about our underwriting department too, but just before I get to that, all of our claims and loss prevention attorneys are licensed in Ohio. We're situated right here in Columbus, so we are accessible. We're here locally and ready to serve our policyholders. Our underwriting team also, have incredible experience. They are situated here as well and are very easy to talk through to answer questions about what type of policy do I need? How should I start to think about what limits are appropriate for me? That kind of thing.
That's great. I love it. This has been a fun conversation. I can say that insurance is fun.
You know, it is more interesting than I ever thought it would be, and certainly a very rewarding career position that I'm in now.
Oh, that's wonderful. All right. At the end of the program, we always ask our guests if there's one piece of advice you have for someone starting a business, or I think in your case, you're uniquely positioned if someone's winding down a business. Do you have any advice for anyone in those positions?
I mean, I think based on the conversation, I have to say identify insurance that is appropriate for your business, identify reputable carriers or agents that you want to work with, and make sure that you understand not just the premium cost, but also the benefits that go with that policy.
That's huge. That's huge. Well, thank
Yeah.
you so much, Marissa. I look forward to seeing you out and about in your marketing role.
Thank you so much for having me, Allison. It's great to see you. Have a great year.
Thanks.